Nir Barkat is a former mayor of Jerusalem. He joins me now, and thanks for being with us, sir. I'm curious what your take is on the chances of a full-scale war and whether that's something Benjamin Netanyahu wants, a ground operation with all the risks that entails. What do you think is the likely scope of the operation?
Well, to remind you, Michael, that when Israel left Gaza 15 years ago, we thought that the Palestinians will create the next Singapore of the Middle East. And unfortunately, they've invested all their capital, the donations they receive from the world, in targeting Israel, in creating a platform for terrorizing Israel and bombing Israel. And so our goal, Israelis' goal, is to deter them and to make sure that we hit the terrorists in a way that will deter them from targeting innocent civilians in Israel. That's our goal. If we need to put boots on the ground, we will. But that's not the target. The target is to deter them from terrorizing Israel.
It's the funny thing about deterrent is that, you know, here we are again. This just happens every few years. When it comes to targeting Hamas militants, you know, one apartment building was destroyed, other big buildings as well. I'm just curious, is there a better way to target specific individuals rather than taking down entire buildings?
Well, unfortunately, the Hamas has a very, very different approach to the Western world. Israel puts the army between the enemy and the civilians. Hamas targets civilians and hides behind civilians. And so what they do to protect the terrorists themselves, they move into a civilian building and they think they're protected. So what Israel does is warns the civilians, please leave because we're going to attack and tell them when we will target the infrastructure of the terrorists. And we will do everything we can to pinpoint and target only the terrorists. And we don't want to hit any civilians. And that's exactly 180 degrees from what the terrorists do.
There's always a debate at times like this, because they keep happening, about proportionality. Do you think the Israeli response is proportional when you look at the damage done and the casualties caused? Again, is there not a different way?
Well, I remember the United States president say that when the United States is targeted, you will use disproportional force to make sure that the enemy understands, to deter them from targeting us. So we will use everything we can to make sure that the terrorists pay a heavy price and hit their infrastructure and decrease their motivation to attack Israel. We will do what we need to do with force, with no fear, until the terrorists will understand that it's better to work with Israel versus fight with Israel.
You're a former mayor of Jerusalem, so I wanted to ask you this, your take on the issues central to all of this, the potential evictions, of Palestinian families from their homes in East Jerusalem, and what critics say is a deliberate creeping settler encroachment on East Jerusalem to change the demographics, to, you know, if you like, dilute the Arab population there in a part of the city that Palestinians would want as capital for their future state. As a former mayor, what do you make of that?
Well, let me make it very clear, Michael. Jews could live anywhere they want in the world. They could live in Atlanta, your hometown. They could live in Damascus. They could live anywhere. Jews, Christians, and Muslims could live anywhere they want. And it's about time that the world stops telling Jews where not to live, especially in the hometown, the capital of the Jewish people, the city of Jerusalem, the holy city of Jerusalem. You want to tell me that people cannot live wherever they want? Now, in this specific case, it's a civilian case decided by the courts, the High Supreme Court of Israel.
I think for Palestinians, I think, just to be clear, I think for Palestinians, one of the more galling aspects of what is happening there, and in particular this time the Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood, is the fact that the law allows settlers to claim historical ownership of Arab homes in East Jerusalem. Palestinians do not have that legal right to claim homes taken post-1948. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that helps with a cohesiveness of the population in the city?
We have high Supreme Court, like in the United States, like anywhere in the Western world. Unfortunately, it's not the same all over here in the Middle East. We're the only democracy. And any dispute goes to the High Supreme Court. So when the High Supreme Court decides that in this case, A will get the house and not B, it has nothing to do with Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. It is a civilian issue. And trying to use a civilian issue to make it political is totally unaccepted. We will act by the High Supreme Court because we're a democracy, and law and order is what we're obliged to law and order.
Yeah, I don't think that's the way they see it, but I hear what you're saying. I did want to ask you too about, very quickly before we end, this violence that's going on in mixed towns. Intercommunal violence is something that we haven't seen before in these sorts of conflicts. How concerning is that in terms of social fabric in these towns?
It is concerning. I am concerned, like many of us here in Israel, because we want to have peace between Arabs, Muslims, Christians, and Jews in our country, like all over the world. And the violence that started by the targets, by the rocket attacks of Hamas by Gaza, unfortunately affected some of the Arabs in mixed cities and towns in Israel. We will have to fight the violence very aggressively. We will not allow anybody to get away with violence or targeting their neighbors, and we will do everything in our power to restore law and order and living together, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, because that's the right thing to do. We have no choice but to battle this unfortunate incidents.
Worrying times. Nir Barkat, thank you so much, former Mayor of Jerusalem. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.